All right, let's dive right into this explainer, where we are going to fundamentally challenge basically everything you think you know about how politics and ideologies actually work. If you've ever looked at the chaotic state of the world and thought, if we just got rid of the political parties, everything would be totally fine. Or if you've ever fiercely defended your favorite political system in an argument with a friend, well, you are exactly who this is for. We're going to test those assumptions today using historical facts, real-world case studies, and a deeply personal thought experiment. So ask yourself this. If every single political party on Earth was just erased overnight, poof, gone, would politics finally become calm and rational, or would it completely collapse into total chaos by the end of the week? Think about it. Every politician and voter still exists, but the official team organizations are just wiped off the map.
It's a completely reasonable instinct to imagine that removing the team jerseys would just fix everything overnight. I mean, at its worst, party politics really just looks like tribal loyalty completely overriding facts. So we naturally dream up this party-free fantasy. We imagine a total elimination of gridlock, honest issue-by-issue voting, and politicians actually voting their conscience. And what's absolutely fascinating is that this beautiful fantasy was actually shared by some of the world's oldest democratic founders.
But as we dive into how this builds historically, you'll see those very same founders quickly realized the harsh reality of human nature. The very men who built the American system actually tried both privately and publicly to prevent political parties from ever forming in the first place. Back in 1796, George Washington literally warned the country against the spirit of party, terrified it would just fuel resentment. But James Madison kind of hit the nail on the head earlier in 1787. He recognized a much deeper reality. Wherever free people have different interests and passions, factions are just inevitable. And honestly, his theory was proven right almost immediately when formal parties established themselves by the year 1800 anyway.
So the founders couldn't stop it. But what if a modern government actually forced the issue? Let's take a look at a massive, real-world case study right in the middle of the United States.
We actually don't have to guess what happens when you ban parties, because Nebraska actually did it. Back in 1934, right in the middle of the Great Depression, Nebraska voters approved this wildly radical reform. They literally eliminated an entire legislative chamber, creating a one-chamber system, and made every single remaining seat nonpartisan by law. They completely wiped party labels off the ballot. And here we are approaching 2026, nearly 90 years later, and Nebraska remains the only one-chamber nonpartisan state legislature in the entire country.
Now let's break down what actually happened. Nebraska successfully stripped out the formal machinery. No official party leadership, no straight-ticket discipline, no secretive party-controlled committees. The whole shebang was gone. But the underlying reality? It didn't budge. Legislators still clustered together predictably along ideological lines. They still formed these quietly negotiated coalitions. The political disagreements didn't just vanish into thin air. They simply reorganized into informal voting blocks, just without the official labels.
Which brings us to a somewhat uncomfortable truth about how humans behave when making collective decisions.
Nebraska essentially proves that you can ban the label, but you absolutely cannot ban the human instinct to coordinate. And we see the exact same thing when zooming out to an entire nation. When Uganda banned multi-party politics for a single national movement system for nearly 2 decades, those informal factions didn't disappear. They just moved underground. They organized quietly within the single structure until they eventually forced a return to multi-party politics in 2005.
The mechanical reason this keeps happening is basically a law of nature, known as Robert Mischel's iron law of oligarchy. Think about it for a second. If you erase parties, you still have hundreds of politicians who need to pass highly complex laws. To do that, you need a coalition of votes. A coalition requires communication and trust. Give that informal group a few years of working together, and it will inevitably look, walk, and act exactly like a formal political party.
And then throw Duverger's law into the mix. This principle explains how simple majority-based elections mathematically push these voting coalitions into roughly 2 dominant camps over time, completely regardless of what anyone actually intends. It proves that parties are really just a symptom of natural disagreement and coordination, not the actual disease itself.
So, if we actually erase parties tomorrow, here's exactly what would happen. Short-term, absolute, complete chaos. You'd have no clear voting blocks, legislators wouldn't know who to negotiate with, and popular politicians wouldn't be able to pass a single thing. And medium term, we'd be right back to a quieter, less formal division, without transparent labels. The exact same disagreements, just organized way more secretly. Exactly like we saw in Nebraska and Uganda.
Since we know factions are historically inevitable, society has to organize into different ideological systems. And that brings us to a reality check about the system you think you want.
50. That is the number of years I want you to hold in your mind right now. Ask yourself honestly, could you, yes you, with your specific job, your distinct personality, and your everyday habits, actually survive 50 straight years living under your absolute favorite political ideology? And I don't mean the clean theory on paper. I mean the gritty, actual Tuesday-to-Tuesday reality.
To test this objectively, we are going to evaluate 6 major ideologies. And remember, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Every single system on Earth demands a personal trade-off. We're going to strictly look at the facts, what you specifically gain and what you specifically lose. Let's see if you can handle the reality of your own beliefs. First up, liberal democracy and free market capitalism. Under this system, you gain incredible personal freedom. You get to choose your career, you can start a business, and if you are ambitious or just really lucky, the ceiling on your personal wealth is sky high. But the catch? You completely lose guaranteed security. If the economy takes a nosedive or you just get plain unlucky, there's no automatic safety net to catch you. Your survival is heavily on you.
Conversely, let's flip over to democratic socialism, kind of like an expanded Nordic-style model. Here, you gain amazing security. Losing your job doesn't mean losing your healthcare or your house. The guaranteed floor for everyone in society is genuinely higher, but the trade-off? You permanently lose a massive slice of your income to taxation to support a growing bureaucracy. And that ceiling on your personal wealth? It's significantly lowered.
Okay, what about a centrally planned communist state? On the gain side, you get guaranteed employment and housing. Market anxiety and cutthroat competition are basically gone, and formal class inequality is vastly reduced. But what you lose is absolutely monumental. You lose almost all political freedom and economic choice. The state decides your job and your home. And historically, you also lose your right to hold dissenting opinions, which can literally threaten your physical safety.
Moving to fascism and authoritarian nationalism. Now, if you happen to be in the favored in group, you gain this intense social order, a powerful sense of collective purpose, and immense national pride. But this comes at a truly catastrophic cost. You completely lose individual political freedom, there is no independent media, and all protections for minorities or dissenters are wiped out. Historically, this ideology consistently ends in severe internal repression and violent conflict. Next is anarchism, a totally stateless, decentralized system. Your big win here is maximum local autonomy. You get a direct, democratic say over decisions that affect you through community mutual aid with no distant bureaucracy breathing down your neck. The loss, however, is scale. Try coordinating a massive national highway, a complex healthcare system, or a defense force against a hostile outside military without central authority. It's genuinely difficult, if not impossible. Finally, traditionalist and religious conservatism. Here, you gain a remarkably deep, stable sense of identity and intergenerational community support networks that completely bypass the need for state bureaucracy. It's strong cultural continuity, but the trade-off is stark. You lose the individual freedom to deviate from established social, familial, and religious roles. If your life doesn't fit the exact traditional mold, this can easily be the most personally restrictive ideology on this entire list. So having looked at all of these, what is the ultimate takeaway from this thought experiment? It all boils down to this. In the abstract, ideologies always sound cleaner than they live. Most of us don't choose our ideology by running an objective, fact-based exercise. We inherit it. And then we spend our entire lives fiercely defending our team in the abstract, severely underestimating how much the system we are cheering for would actually cost us in our real day-to-day lives. So look closely at the ideology you defend the most, the one you are absolutely positive would fix everything if only everyone else would just get out of the way. When you strip away the abstract theory and you really look at the Tuesday-to-Tuesday reality, which specific freedom would be the absolute hardest for you personally to give up? Think about it. Because in the real world, you always have to give up something.